Who's that? Commander Claw. Who's bad? Commander Claw.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're watching this video, most likely you are a Transformers fan. And if you're not, welcome, because I am a Transformers fan. I grew up with Transformers, G1 Transformer toys. Oh, I had them all. I wish I had them all. I had a lot of them. One of my favorite combiners was Predaking and the Constructicons. But anyways, if you're here, I want to welcome you to my favorite commander out of all the commanders I have. I really need to do a deck tech on this, but I really just want to. I really enjoy the Breaking Brews type of format that I have because there's so many things and different themes you can do with commanders, and it's hard just to put your effort into like one entire deck tech with the commander, and it takes more time than I really want to put in because there's so many cool mechanics out there for Magic. But I'm not trying to veer off. Megatron, Tyrant, Destructive Force is his name. If you never played with this commander, or if you played with this commander, there's one word that I like to describe this Mardu commander: punishment. Punishment. There's no other word. When you play with this color pip, red, white, and black, punish your opponents. Do not be afraid to deal damage. Do not be afraid to make them discard cards. Do not afraid to tax them. It does all this. So if you clicked on this video and you're expecting a quick little Breaking Brews 5 cards to look through and you just look through the thumbnails, no. I want to thank you for watching this first 2 minutes because I'm about to show you how to really play with this, how to like some insights on this commander. This is my top commander. My friends, my pod don't let me play with this commander. It got so bad I had to make it a secret commander. Okay, where it's hidden in the 99, so when it comes out, it's game over again. Do not be afraid to throw damage. So let's get right into Megatron Tyrants. First off, what you need to know about Megatron as you build this deck, you got options. You have options. He's a modal commander, honestly. You play either one side or you play the other side. He's almost like two commanders in one with an awesome ability. So I'm going to describe the more than meets the eye ability, okay? And when you use cast it for his more than meets the eye ability, it becomes Megatron Destructive Force. So you literally pay one red, white, and a black. You may cast this card converted for its more than meets the eye, and it becomes Megatron Destructive Force. Legendary artifact. Okay, it's a 4/5 vehicle. It has living metal as an ability. As long as your turn, this vehicle is also a creature. This is important. On your turn, it is a vehicle creature. On your opponent's turn, it is a artifact vehicle. This means if opponent plans to use a targeted removal spell that focuses on creatures, they can only do it on your turn if they want to target Megatron. That is so powerful, more than you expected. Okay? Because a lot of times, Swords of Plowshare says exile target creature. Okay? And I'll get back to that later on. All right, back to Megatron. Whenever Megatron attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact. When you do, Megatron deals damage equal to the sacrifice's artifact's mana value to target creature. If excess damage will be dealt to that creature this way, instead that damage is dealt to that creature's controller and you convert Megatron. Okay, so what you need is to have an artifact, any type of artifact, whether it's 1 CMC, 2 CMC, 3 CMC, whatever, and you can sacrifice it when Megatron attacks. So you need to deal damage to, a creature, okay? And you need to do excess damage. So you got to do more than its toughness. Now, honestly, it's going to be tough when you have low CMC artifacts and your opponents have pretty big, bulky creatures. However, if you looked at a lot of EDH rec and deck lists, they have your high CMC artifact creatures. And I can tell you, they can be difficult to cast, then sacrifice for Megatron. So you kind of need to build your deck accordingly where you can cheat out artifacts for low CMC, put them on the battlefield, go to attack with Megatron. This sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot. It's a lot. But don't be afraid. Because when you do excess damage, you get to convert Megatron, and his ability allows him to add mana. So, what do I really want to say about sacrificing artifacts? A really good land that you should add for this deck is Forbidden Orchard. I believe it's Forbidden Orchard. It's a land where you can tap it for any mana, but you give your opponent a 1/1 spirit flying creature. And obviously, when you go to attack with Megatron Destructive Force, you sacrifice your 2 CMC artifact, right? To blow up that 1/1 flying creature, which would do excess damage, and that 1 damage will trickle over to your opponent, allowing you to convert Megatron. Yes, yes. So, Megatron Destructive Force, it is a good commander. It's protected on certain turns. That's what I really like about it. So now I'll go to the next slide and describe Megatron Tyrant, which is the card sideways a little bit, but on a bigger scale. We got Megatron Tyrant. Total of 6 mana, 3 red, white, and a black. Now remember, if you had him in Megatron Destructive Force and you converted him, he comes over into this side. So his first ability, your opponents can't cast spells during combat, in my opinion, is the most powerful ability he really has. It's not talked about enough. Okay, so when he's flipped over like this, he has, at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may convert Megatron. If you do, add colorless mana for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. Remember, Megatron is a artifact creature, robot, 7/5 body. So, what do I really want to say about this? He's a mana generator. So if you've never seen Transformers, it's almost like the character himself. It's very flavorful. He has the giant cannon on his arm, and that's what you're loading up to do. You're loading up to crank out a bunch of mana into a giant X spell to eliminate your opponents. Most of the time. Most of the time. Yeah. Crackle with Power, Fireball, Giant Simulating Inferno. Those are great cards to have and pump a lot of mana into for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. This deck is also recommended to build with, Dragon's Approach, where you're doing 3 damage to each of your opponents, which allows you to add 9 mana to this guy. So it's just a lot to this commander, but he's just versatile and he's punishing. So let me go back to your opponents can't cast spells during combat. This goes for all your opponent's combat phases, not just yours. And that means your opponents can't do combat tricks, or at least spells that allow to do combat tricks. So all those additional combat phases that your opponents have to cast during combat phase, they can't cast it. All those counter spells that they want to play during a combat phase, they can't cast it. All those swords to plowshares or targeted removals that they want to play during combat, they can't cast it. They have to cast it during a player's main phase or post-combat phase. And sometimes it's not good. The reason why it's not good, it allows you or opponents to be more predictable on what they're going to do. So literally you're making a move ahead, not even ahead, off time. You're just allowing players to, your opponents are just foretelling their hand pretty much. That's what is amazing about Megatron. So, before I get into the first cards, I just want to say Megatron Tyrant, an amazing commander. And the first 2 cards I'm going to show you is how to win the game with them. Beyond a giant X spell. Okay? And you'll be pleasantly surprised. All right, first card I got here on the left-hand side is Heretic's Punishment. For 5 mana, 4 in a red. It's an enchantment. 3 in a red, choose target creature or player. Then put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Heretic's Punishment deals damage to that creature or player equal to the highest converted mana cost among those cards. Okay, if you've seen EDH Rec, it encourages you to play a lot of high CMC artifact creatures that are 7 CMC, 9 CMC, 11 CMC, whatever. They're high. And you want to do this anyway because Megatron has a sacrifice theme and an artifact reanimator theme. So you're literally milling cards and milling the artifact creature cards that you want to put into your graveyard, but you get the synergy to deal damage as they go into your graveyard. Then you can reanimate them with Darity's the planeswalker that I have them later on that reanimates artifacts. It gets gross, and you get to end players' lives straight up, straight up. So the beautiful thing about this card is if you had Megatron converted and you pumped all that mana into it, you can do this ability multiple times. As many times as you do it. There's so many times I've gotten Megatron with 21 mana, 28 mana, because I've had spells and cards that deal damage, whatever, right? And I'm able to do this 6, 7 times. And your opponents won't last when you swinging out 7 damage, 8 damage, 5 damage, 4 damage. I've won a game with the last card that I milled happened to be just the right amount of mana equal to that player's life points. And I only had 1 more activation left. This card is great. Next up, we got Wound Reflection. For 5 and a black, it's an enchantment. It says, at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So if you're doing damage to each of your opponents throughout your turn, let's say you had a Dragon's Approach, you did 3 damage to them, to each opponent. At the end step, they take another 3 damage. This is how you end players' lives quickly. You punish them. And also, what you don't probably have even thought about, the mana that you converted with Megatron, you can put it, Wound Reflection, onto the battlefield. Okay? So all that mana that you created, you can slap Wound Reflection, then you can finish off your opponents with more spells that do damage. So by the end of your turn, this gets activated and it finishes off your opponents. This is how you win the game with Megatron. These 2 cards, if you want to do something besides X spells. I promise you. And what the beautiful thing about Mardu colors, or actually, Mardu and black colors, you can tutor these enchantments. There's white creature cards that tutor enchantments, white instant spells that tutor enchantments. There's demonic tutors that can tutor any card. Like, you can't lose. You can't lose. This commander deals damage. Do not be afraid to deal damage. Now, I told you all these cards, these artifact creature cards that are high CMC. These are just a collection of them. Triplicate Titan, 9 CMC. Phyrexian Triniform, 9 CMC. Spine of the Ish-Sa, 7 CMC. You sacrifice that, you deal excess damage to an opponent, they take 5 right there. You got other spells that deal 1 damage to each opponent. All these additional layers of triggers, dealing damage. Convert Megatron. You can cast this, sacrifice it, get its death trigger effect. Like, Megatron is amazing, man. Amazing. Let me get into Triplicate Titan. For 9 CMC, a 9/9 artifact creature golem as flying, vigilance, trample. Oh my gosh. When Triplicate Titan dies, create a 3/3 colors golem. Artifact creature token with flying, a 3/3 golem with vigilance, a 3/3 golem, artifact creature token with trample. Literally, it splits up. So you get its abilities again in 3 individual creatures. Amazing. Next up, we have Phyrexian Triniform for 9 CMC. Phyrexian Golem, 9/9. When it dies, create 3 3/3 colors Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens. That's awesome, just like Triplicate Titan, but this is where it shines. It has Encore. For 12 mana, exile this card from your graveyard. For each opponent, create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn. It gains haste and sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. This is really good because remember we have Heretic's Punishment? You milled this card, you did 9 damage to an opponent. Later on, if you have 12 mana, you can cast it from the graveyard. It becomes a 9/9 with Encore, so there's 3 9/9s attacking your opponents. Then when it dies, you got 3, 6, 9 creatures after it dies. Those are artifacts. You have a board state, my friend. A board state. Next up, we got Spine of the Ishsa for 7 CMC. Artifact. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. Great. Get rid of any permanent. Opponents have awesome lands, like that 3 city lands from the Bloom Burrow. That card is crazy powerful. Cavern of Souls. That's crazy powerful. You can get rid of enchantments. Okay. It also says when Spine of Ishsa is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Wow. So you get to recast it, reuse it. Recast it, reuse it. Recast it, reuse it. Win, win, win. And destroy a target permanent. And sacrifice it. And it's not a creature, so your opponents can't remove it. Unless it says destroy target artifact. And do opponents really want to waste a destroy artifact on an artifact that's not doing anything unless it's in your hand? No. Okay, by far this is my favorite card because of the efficiency. A 1-drop for 1 red Bolt Wave. It deals 3 damage to each opponent. Remember, Megatron converts for how much mana you do. You convert, you're making mana. For 1 mana, you get to have 9 colorless mana. That's crazy. If you got 3 opponents on the battlefield, that's 9 mana. That's a net plus 8. This card is way too efficient. And it's an auto include, in my opinion. So when you have those turns with Megatron where you want to cast a bunch of spells and you're sequencing, this is definitely a sequencing type of command. Every play you do, your effect, pop, 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 pop off. Explosive turns. Bolt Wave. Gotta add. The rate is great. Okay, so the reason why I say Megatron might be better in the 99 because if he's your commander, your opponents can know it's predictable, right? And they will counter him upon arrival. And also, Aura Shards, which is that green-white enchantment that destroys target artifact or enchantment upon a creature entering the battlefield, is going to annihilate your artifact deck. Okay, so yeah, be very aware of that card. But the Ready Scrap Savant, I mentioned this card before, for 4 mana, 3 in a red. It is a Planeswalker. He says for his first loyalty ability, +2, discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. Great for putting those giant artifacts into your graveyard, the Triplicate Titan or the Phyrexian Triniform. Then, -2 loyalty ability, sacrifice an artifact. If you do return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield, this is a cheap way to put the big boy artifacts onto the battlefield in order to sacrifice them for Megatron Destructive Force. You see what we're trying to do here? Graveyard artifact recursion is more efficient with these spells and having discarding effects to drop the big boy artifact spells into your graveyard. Some way, some fashion. This is the sacrifice thing that you gotta add. And honestly, the loyalty ability -10, I haven't even been able to do this before. But if I did, oh my gosh, my opponents were sleeping. It says -10, the ultimate, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. No way. I never got to use that because the game is over anyway. But if my opponents let me do that, that's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, next up, this is a really good card from Thrones of Eldraine. Lich Knight's Conquest. 4 and a black sorcery says sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens. Return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we have a good amount of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens that we want to sacrifice, and we got our big boy artifacts in the graveyard, they come right on into play for 5 mana. Like, you can get sacrifice 3 treasure tokens to bring back 3 of those giant artifacts that I mentioned, or actually 2 artifact creatures that I mentioned. No way, that's crazy powerful. Great rate for this card. Megatron, really, you can take advantage of its artifact sacrifice thing. So I recently fell upon this card because I cracked it in a booster, and I just happened to read it, and I would just happen to be upgrading my Megatron deck, and when you read a card and you're just like shocked, like what? Wait a minute, why would I do? Should I? Yeah, all those. This is that card. Treacherous Greed. For 1 white and a black is an instant. It says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature that dealt damage this turn. Draw 3 cards. Each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life. Come on, man. Come on, man. What are we doing here? If you happen to hit a player with a 1/1, you tap 3 mana, you get to draw 3 cards. Each opponent loses 3 life. That's a total of 9 life, 9 mana that you could be adding to Megatron when you convert it, and you gain 3 life. Treacherous. This card is treacherous. Deceitful. Oh my gosh. Like, it's a win-win. You draw 3 cards, and these 3 additional cards could be the game-ending cards that you need to add on whatever explosive turn that you plan on setting up with Megatron. Come on now. And it adds to mana. Like, no brainer. So, thank you for watching this Breaking Brews on Megatron Tyrants. My favorite commander out of my entire collection of cards. Uh, hey, if you really like this video, consider subscribing. I'm down to bring more videos out here about these commanders because Magic the Gathering is super fun. Back to Megatron. Remember, when you build this deck, do not be afraid to sling damage or add cards that deal damage because that's what he's trying to do. He wants to deal damage and convert it into mana. And when you convert it into mana, you can play more spells that deal more damage and end the game. That's what he does. That's what your deck will do. So, in the comment section, add any card suggestions that you think players should know about adding with Megatron Destructive Force or Megatron Tyrant. Peace out, Commander.